virtual technology. This is the first time that we've done our meeting this way. So I realize that a lot of us are having these types of events now, and it's our pleasure to be able to bring this one to you. I am, of course, Rob Valdez. I'm currently serving as the president of ISACA South Florida, and tonight we'll be going through a great evening for you that will be 2 hours, as you can see on the agenda for this evening. The first hour is a very special presentation by Dr. Gleb Tsipursky about COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic adaptation and planning via neuroscience and behavioral economics for technology professionals. Dr. Gleb has presented previously to ISACA chapters, and we're very excited to hear his insights that he'll have about tonight's topic. After Dr. Gleb's presentation, there will be the second half of the meeting, which will be chapter administrative affairs, business, and update. We're going to talk about the things that we've been doing for the past year. We're also going to be talking about the very special support that ISACA International and ISACA South Florida are providing in the times of this pandemic. We'll talk about some recognition and special achievements that are deserving of merit. And then we'll also welcome and install the new board, which we're very excited about. So on the right-hand side, you have my contact information and you have our website, just in case anybody is joining and doesn't have that type of information. And then throughout the evening, there will also be opportunities for engagement. While Dr. Gleb is going to give approximately just under an hour presentation, he's going to leave some time at the end for some question and answer. And if you'd like, you can use the Q&A functionality at the bottom of the Zoom session to start to write down questions so that we can address them at the end of Dr. Gleb's presentation. So you can use that functionality at the bottom. And then in the second half, there will be some additional functionality that we're going to use in our meeting. We're going to use some polling where we'll have some engagement and interaction. And then we'll also bring in some other panelists who prepared some thoughts that they wanted to share with you for tonight on the incoming board. So with that being said, what I want to do now is give a brief introduction to Dr. Gleb so that he can get started for this great presentation. So Dr. Gleb Tsipursky is an internationally recognized thought leader on a mission to protect leaders from dangerous judgment errors known as cognitive biases. And in addition to this type of work, he has published a number of different books, and also you can see here a total of 550 articles and 450 interviews that are also published under Dr. Tsipursky's work. So he's very busy on this type of topic, and we're very excited to have him join us here tonight. And without any further ado, what I'm going to do is give Dr. Tsipursky the show. So I will stop sharing. And now, there.
All right, great. Well, welcome everybody. And let's talk about COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic adaptation and planning via neuroscience for IT professionals. There will be some heavy information. I'm just warning you in advance so that you can anticipate it will not be light information. Of course, talking about COVID-19 is never light, but some of the recent stuff that's come out on it makes it especially heavy. So let's talk a little bit about first how people responded. One of the most prominent entrepreneurs, of course, is Elon Musk. And Elon Musk is in the news right now for trying to open up that Tesla factory way ahead of guidelines and when they should be opened. But he's not been in the news for this sort of thing only right now. He also called coronavirus pandemic panic dumb in March 6, 2020. So when it was already becoming quite clear that it was going to be a serious issue in the United States. And of course, he has a wide following among IT professionals and other sorts of folks. So you could see that this got 1.7 million likes. On the March 20th, after the declaration of the national emergency here in the US by the White House, he tweeted that based on current trends, close to 0 new cases in the US by the end of April. Well, we have over 1 million cases, so clearly he's wrong on that. So he clearly underestimated the impact of the pandemic, and as I would say, very much still underestimating it when he's trying to open up his factories. So that's one kind of entrepreneur, very prominent, very big, new money, entrepreneurial technology, whatever. Let's talk to old money. Maybe old money didn't. What did old money think about this? Well, it doesn't get more old money than Goldman Sachs. How did Goldman Sachs respond to it? Goldman Sachs, of course, supports its clients in telling them how to invest, what kind of investments to make, and it gives financial analysis based on it. So it gave an estimate of US GDP growth in the second quarter on February 24th. When coronavirus was becoming a serious issue in Italy, it said that, well, because of the coronavirus pandemic, US growth will only be 2.7. So only 2.7 growth compared to its previous higher estimate. Then what happened 3 weeks later, March 15th? It cut this estimate to a 5% decline. 5% decline from 2.7 growth. This is a huge cut. This is 7.7% change in its estimate of GDP. Huge, and of course, clearly didn't give very good advice to its clients who estimated and invested based on 2.7% growth. But what happened 5 days later, March 20th? It's a 24% decline. In 5 days, its estimate changed from a 5% decline to a 24% decline. Clearly, old money like Goldman Sachs didn't make very good predictions either. Unfortunately, most leaders, the vast majority of leaders, followed the predictions of either new money, like Elon Musk, or old money, like Goldman Sachs. So they were caught unprepared, they greatly underestimated their threat, and they turned to their emergency business continuity plans to address the situation. But these plans are not a good fit for the situation. I say this as someone who makes a lot of these plans. This is my expertise as a disaster avoidance expert, disaster management, risk management, decision making. I make a lot of business continuity plans. They're not a good fit for the situation. I know a number of ISACA members who focus on risk management. Folks I talked to, who I presented to, they also make business continuity plans. Not a good fit for the situation. Why? They're great for emergencies. They're wonderful for emergencies. They're meant for a situation like a blizzard or like, let's say Houston. Houston got flooded last year pretty badly. Businesses were out of commission for a week, 2 weeks. Those business continuity plans are great for that. COVID-19 is not that. It's not an emergency. It's like Houston got flooded and then stayed flooded. You should not function as though that's an emergency. It's a major disruption that changes our environment fundamentally. It's a slow-moving, high-impact, long-term threat. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And relying on business continuity plans is a bad idea. It leads to a lot of serious problems because you're running in emergency mode when you shouldn't be. Let's talk about facts about COVID-19. Highly contagious, very contagious. Every infected person, based on recent research, infects about 2 to 3 other people on average. And the number of cases doubles every 3 to 6 days. So I know ISACA professionals are good at math, so you understand the problems of logarithmic expansion. Salespeople, not so good at math. It has to be really explained to them, but I'm not going to explain this in detail to you. Understand the problems. Risk of serious illness, pretty bad potential in terms of infection rate, speed. There's serious risk of illness. 10 to 20% of the people who get it are seriously ill. And that counts as asymptomatic cases. We know that about 50% of people at any time don't know they have COVID-19. They don't have symptoms, even though they're infectious. They get other people infected. Of the rest of the people, about 20 to 40% get seriously ill. So 10 to 20% of the whole total of people get seriously ill. And then half of the seriously ill, so 5 to 10% of all people who get ill, that includes asymptomatic people, need to get hospitalized. So it's much more deadly than the flu. Recent research shows that about 0.5 at the lowest bound to 1% at the higher bound die from COVID-19 with great hospital treatment. Great hospital treatment, most advanced hospital treatment, 0.5 to 1% die. And with the flu, it's about 1.1%, so about 5 to 10 times more deadly than the flu. We know there's much higher death rate for people over 60 and people in vulnerable categories with COVID-19, and there's no effective treatment. The most effective treatment we have so far is remdesivir, this drug, and what it does, as far as we know, is it reduces the time that somebody spends hospitalized from 15 days on average to 11 days on average. And that's good. It reduces the morbidity, the sickness, time of sickness. It reduces long-term damage. We don't know yet whether it reduces mortality, meaning whether somebody dies or not. and it reduces hospital load, but by a third, so less than a third. So it's not that wonderful. It's not a silver bullet by any means. Vaccine is a silver bullet. That's what we need to deal with COVID-19. That's the only effective solution. And human trials are needed to test the safety and effectiveness. A number of vaccines are in human trials. Now, in order to test safety, if you throw all the money possible, which we are throwing at COVID-19 for vaccine research, throwing tons of money at it, and you cut all the regulatory tape that's possible, really cut it as much as possible, the safety trials take about 4 months, and the effectiveness trials take about 8 months. And so that's estimated to take about a year. That's with all the regulation cut, all the money available, as opposed to the usual 4 to 5 years for a vaccine trial. Now, unfortunately, and this is just the reality of the situation, most vaccines don't make it through human trials, especially ones that were rushed into production, like let's say you've probably been hearing about the Moderna vaccine. That was in trials from something like mid-March. Now, that was rushed into production. And as you know, things that are rushed into production often have flaws. So now we recently discovered about 10 days ago that there's apparently a more lethal strain of COVID-19 than the first strain that was reported. And it's that first strain that was reported for which the Moderna vaccine was created. Now, this new, more lethal strain that was mutated, the Moderna vaccine might or might not be effective against it. We don't know. Hopefully it is. That would be wonderful. But it's quite possible that it's not. And that's what happens when you kind of rush things into production. So there's more reason to believe it's not going to be as effective as we hoped. It's unlikely in general that the first vaccines are successful. Now, what happens after a vaccine is ready? Well, the government has to coordinate the process of producing, distributing, and actually vaccinating people. Unfortunately, the government, at least in the US, has not been very effective in the early stages of the pandemic, from everything to producing testing, to organizing and coordinating state responses, to ensuring that there's good logistics, buying of healthcare supplies, personal PPE, you've heard that, the personal protective equipment, ventilators, so on. The US government has gotten very low marks from experts on logistics and healthcare for its response to COVID-19. So I don't estimate that there's a good chance that they'll be great at producing and distributing vaccines. So you have to understand that. Possible timelines. Let's think about timelines. There's an optimistic one, there's a moderate one, and there's a pessimistic one. Optimistic. It assumes that we get really lucky with the Moderna vaccine or one of the other vaccines that's rushed into production. So it's approved for mass production by summer of 2021. That's the year-long trial process. Then production, distribution, vaccination, we're assuming that the government shows a surprising excellent level of competence. A number of governments have shown that level of competence. For example, the South Korean government has done a really good job. The German government has done a really good job. The German government, by comparison, is a really good comparison. Germany is very diverse, very complex, very well developed country that is culturally in many ways similar to the US. But in terms of infection and deaths, it only has 7,000 deaths compared to over 80,000 in the US. So it's done a much better job in what it's doing. So we'll assume that high level of government competence, 6 months. So then you'll have most people vaccinated, which we know in order to get to herd immunity, you need to have about 60% of the people vaccinated, who are not going to pass on COVID-19 by early 2022. So let's say that all the vulnerable people over 60 and people with vulnerable health conditions. This is very low likelihood that we'll have by the start of 2022 this situation. I'd say it's less than 5%, just because of the reality. I mean, I gave you the math. Everything has to line up, all the ducks in a row, and the government has to be extremely competent. Then the moderate scenario. So the moderate scenario assumes that the first batch of vaccines is not going to succeed. Maybe the second batch will succeed, or the third batch will succeed. So it's approved by mass production by 2023. Now that I'm assuming a time range anywhere from late 2022 to late 2026, with late 2025 with 2023 as a midpoint for that. And then production, distribution, vaccination, we're assuming a moderate level of government competence, perhaps a little bit more competent than the government has shown right now. It'll take about a year for a moderate level of government competence. And so most people will be vaccinated by 2024. So this is the most likely scenario. That's that range from late 22 to late 26, with 2024 being the midpoint. That's 70%. Now, the pessimistic scenario, we might get unlucky. It might be much more tough to produce a vaccine than we hope for some reason or other. So in that case, we'll get a vaccine by 2026 that's approved and effective enough. Then production, distribution, vaccination, moderate level of competence takes a year. If it was pretty incompetent, maybe a year and a half, but let's say a year. So most people will be vaccinated by 2027. This is a realistic scenario. I'd say it's a 25% chance. I mean, you might think this is too cynical, this is too dark, but you know what? We still don't have an effective vaccine for the flu, and we've been battling the flu for over a century. The current vaccine we have is only 50% effective. That's not really enough. You cut COVID-19 death rates from 0.5 to 1% to 0.25 to 0.5%. That's still going to be huge. So that's not really going to be enough, unfortunately. Suppression is unfortunately the only top tactic we have available in the US, at least, given that we're not an authoritarian society. For example, in China, it was possible for them to put locks and chains on people's doors in Wuhan. It's not something, and have everybody download an app that traces their movements. That's not something we can do. In South Korea, people were voluntarily willing to undergo high level of surveillance. This is not something that people seem like they're willing to do. You've probably seen the recent protests. People don't seem like they're willing to do that in the US. So shutdowns and social distancing are the only tool that we have, unfortunately, terribly, to deal with COVID-19. That's in order to avoid overwhelming hospitals, because if you overwhelm hospitals, all the people who would need to go to the hospital will pretty much die. So you have the death rate shooting up by 10%, from 0.5 to 1% to 5 to 10%, like what happened in Italy. In Italy, it was actually the latest thing I saw when the hospitals were overwhelmed, it was close to 12%. So pretty bad. Suppression is extremely costly, hugely costly for the economy. It's very damaging, but it's effective. We know that aggressive suppression, and some areas in the US had more aggressive suppression than others. So for example, California had aggressive suppression, New York State had aggressive suppression. They were able to bring down the infection rate quite effectively. Ohio had pretty aggressive suppression. And a number of countries had pretty aggressive suppression, and they were able to bring down the COVID-19. Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, we know that. Unfortunately, once those countries started opening up, so let's say a recent example, South Korea started opening up, the number of cases increased. There was an incident traced where somebody went to a nightclub and partied with about a nightclub, pretty full, packed, went to 5 nightclubs in a night, was somebody who was sick with COVID-19. There were 5,200 people around this person in those really super packed nightclubs, and the number of them got sick, and then they started spreading COVID-19. So the government had to go and shut down the nightclubs and restaurants as a result of that. This is what we're facing. Realistically speaking, this is what we're dealing with. This is our future until widespread vaccination. We're seeing here in the US right now the loosening of restrictions in a number of areas. And we're already seeing an uptick of cases in many states that have loosened restrictions, for example, Texas and so on, Alabama. We're seeing that uptick in cases. And as a result, we'll eventually get tighter restrictions as the cases start approaching the numbers that would overwhelm medical systems, because no governor can really afford politically a situation that looks like New York City or looks like northern Italy, where you need refrigerated trucks outside of hospitals to hold bodies and mortuaries get overwhelmed. This is not going to be something that is politically viable here in the US. So there will be eventually tighter restrictions, followed by a decrease in cases. And that will be something that we're dealing with until vaccine, these repeating waves, tighter, more cases, tighter, less cases, looser, more cases. So we'll have to deal with various levels of social distancing, suppression, and so on for the next quite a while. This is not a short-term emergency. This will not blow over. This current reopening of the economy that we're having will not last. COVID-19 is a major disruption. and it will last in the most optimistic scenario until early 2022. That's less than a 5% chance. The world will change forever. Just realistically, the world here in the US and around the world will change forever because we're dealing with these waves of restrictions and loosenings. So people's habits, their values, their norms, their expectations, their behaviors, their desires, they will change. We'll never go back to January 2020, however hard that is to hear. And your role as a trusted advisor, so you and ISACA are the leaders in computer, in IT departments, leaders in auditing, leaders in risk management. Your role as a trusted advisor is to help the leaders who you advise realize the extent of this major disruption. That is your responsibility because leaders overwhelmingly of companies, organizations, they tend to be too optimistic. I mean, and I know this, I work with leaders all the time and I need to hold their feet to the ground. You need to help them prepare for this uncomfortable reality. This is your responsibility as a trusted advisor. By doing so, it will benefit you and them. For them, it will help them accomplish their leadership goals, and they'll be very grateful eventually to you after you convince them of this situation and they accept the uncomfortable reality of the situation. It will help them accomplish their leadership goals in the long term, and it will build up you as a trusted advisor in their eyes. This is really important and valuable for you, of course. Don't plan for the most optimistic scenario. I want to highlight this. It's very tempting to go for early 2022. Too many companies are, they're thinking, it's going to all blow over by a couple of months, not even 2022. But you should not plan for early 2022. This will not happen. It's unlikely to happen by early 2022, very unlikely. Hope is not a strategy. It's a great quote attributed to Vince Lombardi, and that's a football coach, so that's something that your leaders will probably respect. You want to prepare for the moderate, or ideally prepare for the pessimistic scenario, and we'll talk about how to do that. Now, the pandemic is a slow-moving threat, and humans, just as human beings, we make really bad decisions about these sorts of things. We are not good at dealing with slow-moving threats. The ones that are unusual, slow-moving, because of how our brain is wired. And here we're getting into the neuroscience of it. Our gut reaction, our intuition, our feelings, our emotions, we underestimate such threats. It's just the way that we're built. And this leads to decisions that endanger our businesses and other organizations with which we're affiliated. Now, in order to help you understand where I'm coming from and my expertise to talk about this decision-making risk management, let me share a little bit more about me. My experience, clients, media, and books. My experience. So I've been doing this for over 20 years. The CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, consulting, coaching, and training firm. We've been helping clients in disaster avoidance, risk management, decision-making, and strategic planning. I've also spent 15 years in academia researching neuroscience and behavioral economics on these topics, published in a whole bunch of peer-reviewed venues like Behavior and Social Issues, Journal of Social and Political Psychology, and other high prominent venues, peer-reviewed venues. So that's my experience. Now, I've worked with a number of clients from innovative startups to Fortune 500 companies, as well as nonprofits and municipalities, so ranging from Aflac to Xerox. So that's part of my background. Then my media. So as Rob kindly mentioned, I've published in a whole bunch of venues, prominent venues like King, Time Magazine, CNBC, was interviewed in NPR, CBS News, published in Fast Company, Newsweek, Scientific American, and many, many more. Finally, my books. So I have 4 books, 4 best-selling books. Never Go With Your Gut, How Pioneering Leaders Make the Best Decisions and Avoid Business Disasters is the one I'm best known for, published by Career Press. And that's, of course, in business decision-making. The Blindspots Between Us, How to Overcome Unconscious Cognitive Bias and Build Better Relationships, focuses on relationships, professional and personal. The Truth Seeker's Handbook, a science-based guide. How do you help yourself accept reality, see reality accurately, accept reality when it's so uncomfortable, like around COVID-19, and help other people do so? And finally, my just published book, which hit the bestseller list, Resilience, Adapt and Plan for the New Abnormal of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. So that's my background, my thought leadership. All right, that's enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about decision-making, the cognitive neuroscience of it. Bad advice on decision-making is very common because of dangerous judgment errors called cognitive biases. They come from 2 related areas. Our evolutionary psychology, so how our brain has evolved because of the way that we are adapted. We're adapted, our intuition, our gut reaction, the older part of our brain their feelings, our emotions are adapted for the savanna environment, not the modern environment. There are a number of important implications for COVID-19 and other decisions. And for generally how our brain is wired, the structure of our brain, which and the way that we process information, can't process too much information at a time and get overwhelmed, and we make dangerous judgment errors as a result of the approach that we take to shortcuts. So for COVID-19, one of the really important things you need to realize in terms of decision making is that we respond to threats with a fight or flight response. That's our main response to threats. It was great for our hunter-gatherer ancestors. That's what our lizard brain is adapted for. The risks that they faced were immediate and tense in the moment. Saber-toothed tigers, you might have heard of this as the saber-toothed tiger response, where we have to jump at 100 shadows in order to get away from that one saber-toothed tiger. Unfortunately, it's much, much, much worse to do that in the modern world. You might notice we have many less saber-toothed tigers. The risks we face are long-term, uncertain, ambiguous. They come from our email, from newsletters, from notifications on our cell phone. That's what the risks come from. And there are specifically three dangerous judgment errors, three cognitive biases that are most relevant to COVID-19: the normalcy bias, planning fallacy, and hyperbolic discounting. Normalcy bias has to do with how we feel about what is normal. In the savanna environment, it was important for us to feel like the world is not changing and to reject information about the world changing. There's a thunderstorm. It doesn't mean that the world will always be thunderstorming. Our world, it was mainly the same. It wasn't changing. So we assume, our gut intuition, our reaction is to assume that everything will keep going normally. There will be no major changes and disruptions. And this leads us to focus the short-term future, the next couple of years, as though it's going to be like the last couple of years. And as a result, we greatly underestimate the kind of disruptors that exist in the modern world. We underestimate their likelihood and their impact. Whether it's the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, it's very hard for us to viscerally accept that we're never going back ever to January 2020, and our world, even if we get a vaccine by early 22, has changed forever in very fundamental ways. It's very hard for us to accept that. Hard for me to accept that. Hard for me to, when I was learning about this information and I was sharing about it with my clients, it was hard for me to accept it. It was hard for them to accept it. So this is painful information. It's very important to accept the reality of this information. Otherwise, we're not really going to get anywhere if we stick our heads in the sand like the mythical ostrich idea. But it's very hard to do. It's very painful. And I realize that. And it's been painful for me too. That's the normalcy bias, the planning fallacy. That's our pride in ourselves. So we feel proud of ourselves. We feel proud of our plans. We assume that the future will go according to plan. And that leads us to underestimate risks, problems, major disruptors like the COVID-19 pandemic, like the fiscal crisis of 2008, 2009, and much smaller things that cause our plans to go astray. We underestimate needed resources of time, money, information, social capital, strategic planning, and so on in order to make good plans. So we don't make good plans intuitively. Finally, hyperbolic discounting. In the savanna environment, it was very valuable for us to be oriented toward the immediate moment. If we killed a mammoth, we couldn't preserve the meat, so it was not very useful for us to orient toward preserving that meat. In the modern environment, of course, we can put our money in the bank, we can figure out what to do with our company, our organization. These are long-term establishments, but we really underestimate the importance of the long-term future and sacrifice it for the sake of the short term, like a number of companies and states and governors that are rushing to open up and sacrificing the reality of the long-term future, that they'll have much more economic pain because they're rushing to open up too fast. This is unfortunate. Some states, to be clear, are too slow. They are in a situation where they might well be able to open up, and they're not doing that. But most of the states, most of the problems are coming from states going too fast, not following the White House guidelines on when they should be opening up. That leads us to harming the long term and underestimating the long-term outcomes and impacts of what we're doing. These are the three biggest errors for COVID-19. Now, to overcome them, we need to go against our intuitions. Our intuitions, again, they helped human beings survive, but we are not wired to make good decisions intuitively in the modern world. And you know that from some areas, from physical fitness. When we come across a source of sugar in the ancestral savanna environment, it was important for us to eat as much of it as possible, honey, bananas, apples, in order to survive and thrive. We're the descendants of those who ate as much sugar as possible, otherwise we wouldn't have survived, and those who had a very strong fight or flight reflex, the ones that didn't die. In the modern environment, having all the sugar that you can get your hands on is not a good idea. They serve donuts. Donuts are served by the dozen, right? A box of dozen donuts. So if you get a box of dozen donuts, it's a bad idea to eat it by yourself in one sitting. Bad idea. But when you eat one donut, it really triggers you. It really gets you tempted to eat more and more and more. And then, before you know it, you're only seeing crumbs in the box. Not that I ever did it, right? Or if you get a gallon of ice cream, there's a serving of ice cream is supposed to be 1 cup of ice cream, right? But if you eat 1 cup of ice cream, like really, you're only going to eat 1 cup? I don't think so. Many people end up, I'm not talking necessarily about myself, but potentially about myself, end up eating half the jar of ice cream once they started. So it's very hard to stop once you start, because we're triggered by sugar. And this is very difficult for us to deal with once we're triggered. It's much better, much healthier for us to have a healthier dessert in the first place, like a bowl of fruit. And we know that, and we try to do it, although we don't always succeed. There is a reason we're facing the obesity epidemic here in the US. But you've worked hard to try to have healthier eating habits, like eating fruit instead of donuts. It's hard to do, but that's what you need to do for your physical fitness. Unfortunately, people don't work on their mental fitness. It's even more important to have a healthy mind as to have a healthy body, I think, in the modern environment, given that we work with our mind much more than we work with our body. But we don't focus on it, and we don't work on addressing those dangerous judgment errors that cause us to make bad decisions. So let's talk a little bit about what the implications are of making good decisions about COVID-19, preparing. You need to make long-term, fundamental changes to your plans. You need to think years, not weeks. So not the business continuity plan, but fundamental changes to your business model, very basic changes for a future focused on virtual interactions. You don't want to yo-yo back and forth to the office when there's a restriction, loosening of restrictions. People are like, oh yes, let's go back to the office. It's tempting, but it's a bad idea, because in a couple of months, you'll still need to go back home once there's going to be more harsh restrictions, and it's going to be more difficult for you to deal with that situation. Not to mention that you might get COVID-19 spread around the office. That's a very problematic situation. It's much better to make a commitment right now to only virtual interactions, virtual teams, virtual engagements. And you'll have a serious savings by giving up office space. A number of my clients have already broken their leases. It's only 2 months of their rent, first month and last month, and they're free of their lease, and they're saving a whole lot of money, and they're having their teams work at home. So that's a much better situation. So let's talk about virtual teams, virtual offerings, how you need to effectively adapt to COVID-19. There are 6 areas of changes to your internal business model that we'll go through. Cybersecurity, obviously, motivation, engagement, effective communication, conflicts, resolving them, cultivating trust, and accountability. Cybersecurity. This is an obvious one. I'm sure many of you know this, but I'm just going to highlight this. For those working from home are more vulnerable to cyber attacks. Why is this? Well, first of all, it's factual. We know the FBI has found that there's a lot more hacking going on right now than there was before the COVID-19 started. People are more vulnerable to cyber attacks for a number of reasons. One, their computers, of course, are not as hardened against cyber attacks at home as they are in the office. That's one. Two, they're not used to following cyber security protocols at home as they are used to following them in the office. That is another problem. So you need to provide them with training. You need to improve cybersecurity by providing them with training and funding. Training for how to follow good cybersecurity protocols and guidelines at home, and funding to make sure to have their computers hardened for the need to have virtual teams. So that's really important. Motivation engagement. Already before the pandemic, we've had a crisis of motivation engagement here in the US. Of those people, Gallup polling has shown that only 34% of all employees are fully engaged. That means they're active, they're creative, they're willing to sacrifice for the company, stay late, whatever, problem solve. Most people, over 50%, are kind of disengaged. They're passive. They're just putting in the bare minimum needed to not be fired, ready to leave at the first available opportunity. They're kind of passive, just doing that. And about 15% of the people are actively hostile. They're looking for an opportunity to leave. They're bad-mouthing the company. And that was before the pandemic. Now, what happened with the pandemic? Well, many people are, of course, transitioning to working at home. That makes it much more problematic. In the first several weeks, people are still dealing with the pandemic. There's still that kind of rush of adrenaline, excitement, rally around the company, around the flag. But over time, we're human beings are tribal creatures. This is a fundamental aspect of our evolutionary psychology. So we've grown up in those small tribes, not grown up, but our intuition, our instincts, our reactions are to orient towards small tribes. And we lack motivation and engagement when we're not surrounded by people who are doing the same thing that we are. We're not surrounded by our tribe. So this will be, of course, more difficult over time for people to be motivated and engaged when they're working from home. Plus all the other issues, all the other disruptions of the pandemic, with schools being closed, teenagers who were in college moving back home. This is a big problem. So people have to deal with this. You need to provide them with support and guidance for these issues. Not a matter of professional development, just support, guidance for how to deal with these issues. Next, effective communication. This is an important area. The people who are used to communicating face-to-face in the office have a lot of difficulty with moving to virtual communication, because virtual communication mainly takes place in collaboration platforms like Slack, like Trello, like Asana, like Microsoft Teams, and a number of others. And as a result of that, you lose body tone, body language and tone. You lose the ability to see whether somebody has an anxious face, worried face, excited face. You lose that emotional language, so from their body language, and you lose tone of voice. So if I say something like, I think Michael should take that project, or I think Michael should take that project, those two sentences mean very different things, but if you write them down, they mean they're the same thing. So there's a lot more misunderstandings that happen in virtual communication. This is a matter of professional development. It's really very important to train employees on how to communicate effectively in virtual teams. Next, resolving conflicts. It overlaps, but it's not the same thing at all as effective communication. In face-to-face environments in the office, it's much easier to address conflicts. You can notice problems developing by seeing whether, again, somebody has a face that's worried, anxious, problematic, somebody seems tense. You can check in with them, what's going on, and so on. That allows you to notice and resolve problems early. In a virtual team, that doesn't happen. You can't see them. You can't see what's going on. So you can't notice the problems nearly as well. And it's much harder to resolve them because of the communication issues. This is another area of professional development. You can train your employees, and this is doable. Next, cultivating trust. Many people don't think of this area as part of virtual team support, but it's incredibly important, because in office settings, we naturally cultivate trust through just conversations, relationship building, getting together for lunch and asking what's going on with the kids, or talking about the water cooler about the local sports team or something like that, what your vacation plans. Those are all things that we do naturally in the office. But of course, we don't do those in virtual environments. There's no setting for it. There's no venue for it. So this doesn't happen naturally. That means that you need to provide a support system for this, an institution for this. You need to, again, be a trusted advisor for your leader. All of this is about being a trusted advisor to the leadership of your organization and helping them do all of these things for virtual teams, virtual support. So this is stuff that you can bring to your leadership team and tell them that, hey, these are things we really should be doing. This is not a matter of training. This is a matter of providing a venue, a support system. And I can talk about that. I've done quite a bit of this transition work for helping people develop virtual teams. Finally, accountability. Accountability is something that people think about a little bit, but not nearly enough when they're transitioning to virtual teams. In the office, the supervisor has natural accountability because they're able to walk about the office, see who's doing what's going on, and address problems, hesitations, tensions in the moment, and make sure that people are accountable. You see the supervisor walking around, you get a little bit more to work. That's kind of a natural human pattern, natural, intuitive, tribal. There's also accountability from your peers. So if somebody can come up to your cubicle and say, hey, Bob, where's that report that you were going to get me yesterday? That's something that is very hard to ignore. It's easy to ignore someone who's shooting you an email or a Slack message with that information. But it's much harder to ignore a living human being standing in your cubicle. So you need to provide accountability venues that are both the chain of command accountability venues and peer-to-peer accountability venues in virtual settings. So those are the 6 main areas of virtual teams. Those are the things you want to think about. And that's your internal business model. So your external business model, how you change your interactions with the outside world. Service delivery, relationships, managing disruptions, shifting norms, unknown unknowns, and outcompeting your competition. Those are the areas you want to be thinking about and providing support as a trusted advisor to the leadership of your organization. Service delivery. You want to change your service delivery as much as possible to virtual offerings. Socially distanced if you can, but as much as possible to virtual is doable. A lot of people will find it easier than others. You can change your professional services. There are lots of apps that allow you to deliver services virtually, much easier to do than many people think they are. You want to be creative. So for example, for me, a lot of my business depends on face-to-face interaction. I'm a speaker, trainer, consultant, coach, right? So and that's what the company that I run, 6 people. Well, what we're doing right now is we're transitioning all virtual, and we're figuring out what are the best ways of delivering the same services in virtual settings and addressing all of these problems right now. So this is something that I'm doing, and this is something that a number of people are doing who are savvy about what the future holds. Now, I want to be very clear. This is not possible in all businesses. This is a hard question, but a number of businesses, it might be a better time to get out of that business, to cash out, get out, not spend your time on this. In fact, I helped a client who is the COO, she was the COO of a chain of diners in the Midwest. I think something like 24 diners in the Midwest, COO. And she realized, that I was talking to her early onward in the pandemic, that diners, restaurants in general will not do well over the next at least 2 years until we have a vaccine. So we talked about the situation, we evaluated her options, and we decided that it's going to be best for her to change her industry. So she had to go change her industry, evaluate the situation, look for a new industry where her skills would be a fit. And she recently found the position as the regional manager of a district, regional district manager of a number of grocery stores, of a large grocery chain. Now, this is definitely a move down the hierarchy from the COO of 24 restaurants to the regional district manager of a large chain of grocery stores. So, of course, there are other regional managers, but we're pretty sure that she'll move up pretty fast the chain of command because she has the experience to do so, and there's much more stability in this industry. Grocery stores are going to do well in the pandemic, and there's a lot of growth potential. So that's an example that you want to be thinking about for yourself as well. Relationships. You want to be thinking about how your company, you cultivate the relationships, both establishing new relationships and maintaining old ones virtually. This is a skill that's not the same as doing it face-to-face. Salespeople are especially find it difficult because they're so used to face-to-face interactions. The shake of the hand, the pat on the shoulder, all of those things don't work. You see each other at best with video conferencing, small squares on the screen, right? You lose a lot of body language, you lose a lot of tone, you lose a lot of things that you would see in face-to-face interactions. It's difficult, it's hard, it's not easy, but there are specific skills that can be developed in this area. So you want to cultivate those relationships with clients, service providers, political leaders, especially now with government stimulus funding, prospects, investors, suppliers, and this is an area of professional development. This can be developed, this is something you can learn. Shifting norms. You want to be thinking about how norms, expectations, behaviors will shift over this time. Managing disruptions first, so not shifting norms. Managing disruptions. A number of the external stakeholders with whom you engage will not be nearly as savvy as you. You're checking out this webinar, you need to plan for the long term, change your business model fundamentally. A number of them will not be nearly as savvy, so they will not plan for the long-term disruptions. You need to protect yourself and your company and the leaders who you support from their failures. You need to make a plan to do so. All right, shifting norms. So this is a good one for you to think about right now, depending on which industry. We talked about how there will be a lot of norms that will shift over this time, even if it's only 2 years, which is unlikely. You think about how your company can get ahead of the curve and anticipate these shifts, because if you can provide what the market needs ahead of what the market knows it needs, you'll be in a great position. Unknown unknowns. The pandemic was a predictable disaster. This is clear, it's obvious. There are a number of experts and not experts. So Bill Gates is a prominent, for example, person who was predicting the reality and probability of a pandemic already early onward. I think in 2017 he gave a TED talk about this. So you can predict these sorts of disasters. Scan the environment for these potential disasters and protect yourself against them. There are a number of steps you could have taken to protect yourself against the pandemic, from not simply a business continuity plan, but a long-term plan to deal with major disruptors. There are some things that you can't predict, and for that, you can build up a cash cushion, because cash is always going to be useful to deal with an emergency. It would have been great for airlines if they built up a cash cushion. A number of companies did build up a cash cushion. They're smart about the situation. Microsoft, for example, is very well known as a company that maintains a great cash cushion because they want to be able to deal with disruptions. Airlines spend their very high profits over the last decade on buying back stocks. Bad idea. Bad idea. They did not have a nearly good enough cash cushion. Now, this is something that the leaders that you talk to will like. You want to realize that the steps I shared will help you gain a major competitive advantage against the competition, because many of them will fail to adapt to the pandemic. And this is something you can take advantage of. This is an opportunity for you, for your company, to get ahead of these competitors who will stumble if you take the steps that I'm talking about here. So you can help your leaders, help your company seize market share in advance of the situation. So make a plan for doing so and hire away good employees from stumbling competitors. All right, these are the 6 areas of the external business model. Now, I want to talk about making an effective plan, not a plan that's perfect, ideal, yes, this will happen, and which will go wrong. This is a plan that will, in broad shape, help get you to where you want to go with the reality of the pandemic. You look at the possible futures, look at 5 years out, examine problems, opportunities, resources you need, and information that indicates where you're going. Possible futures. So you want to plan for a variety of possible futures. Don't make only a simple plan that says, this is what will happen. Think about what your business will look like, what your career will look like in a number of different futures, and invest your resources accordingly for the moderate or ideally pessimistic scenario. Optimistic scenario, vaccine by 2022. Moderate, vaccine by 2024. Pessimistic, vaccine by 2027. So what will happen to you, to your business, to your organization in 5 years in each of these scenarios? Think about that. Optimistic, moderate, pessimistic. Make a plan for each of those for 5 years. Then think about the problems. What problems might occur in each of these scenarios? List them out. Think of ways to address them in advance. So for example, if a problem that you anticipate is that let's say you work in a manufacturing plant and you work in a manufacturing company, and one of the big problems might be disruptions of supply chains when the pandemic goes much longer than you anticipate. Or if you work, let's say, in a bank, then one of the things that obviously Goldman Sachs got this wrong. So if you work in a bank, the bank might not anticipate how bad it will be, how bad the defaults will be in the long term, because the pandemic will be much longer and much worse than people are thinking it is. So in both cases, the supply chains you can address by getting more local suppliers, getting supplies built up in advance, having backup suppliers. The problem with the defaults you can address in a number of ways through various fiscal mechanisms, and we can talk in the Q&A about that. Or you can make a plan to address them if they do occur and you can't address them in advance. So that's one. Then opportunities. Think about opportunities that might come up. List potential opportunities in each scenario and think of ways of bringing them about. So for example, if you anticipate that your competitor might stumble, you can have the salespeople in your organization go to potential prospects who are currently working with your competitors and who you would like to have and say, hey, we took these steps A, B, C, D, or Z to be pandemic proof. And so if our competitor is not very pandemic proof and they stumble when they're providing services to you, we can step in and be pandemic proof and you can rely on us. And they will remember this when your competitor stumbles, and that will be an opportunity for them to come to you. Or, of course, you can make a plan to seize opportunities when they do occur. Resources. Think about the kind of resources you need in each of these scenarios. Money, time, information, planning, strategic capital, social capital, whatever, all of this stuff. Think about the resources. Make a plan to reserve sufficient resources for the pessimistic scenario. I strongly encourage this. This will be really helpful for you. You can use those resources otherwise if you reserve them, but you want to reserve for the pessimistic scenario, at least the moderate one. Some of my clients have trouble, some of the startup clients, not the established ones, have trouble reserving resources for the pessimistic scenario, so we're working on the moderate scenario reservation. Don't plan for the optimistic one. This is very tempting, but it's, hope for the best but plan for the worst. And then information. Think about what information would indicate to you that you're in the optimistic scenario, the moderate scenario, or the pessimistic one. So for example, if you see the Moderna vaccine trials not going as well as would be ideal, then you can say, okay, most likely we won't have a vaccine by early 2022. Monitor this information closely and adjust your plans accordingly, depending on which scenario looks like it's happening. And then just execute, execute, execute. All right, so that's the presentation. For additional resources on this topic, please go to tinyurl.com/de-event for a free coaching session with me and 2 chapters from my forthcoming book, Resilience, Adapt and Plan for the New Abnormal of the COVID-19 Coronavirus Pandemic. This should be, the book is just out, so it's not forthcoming. But anyway, Adapt and Plan for the New Abnormal of the COVID-19 Coronavirus Pandemic. Check out tinyurl.com/de-event, free coaching session, 2 chapters. All right, that's what I wanted to share with you today, and I hope this has been helpful. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gleb. I confess that I am a little bit concerned after hearing some of these comments, but nonetheless, I'm very grateful for the opportunity for you to share this information, and now to take some time to respond to some of the questions and comments from our participants. So what I'll do is, a couple of people are writing in questions in chat and in question, and I'll go ahead and maybe read you out some of the things that have been written. So Glenn Kirk says, do you have any comments on the 1969 Hong Kong flu pandemic and the vastly different response? And I don't know if you'll have context for that specific pandemic, and if so, I can potentially let in Glenn to give us additional context for that.
I don't have too much context. I think the best comparison is the 1918-17 flu. That's the best comparison. And the US did not do very well with that comparison, with that situation either, unfortunately, but we had much poorer technology at that time. But something that's important to realize about studies on the 1917-1918 flu is that they showed that states and cities, municipalities that acted early onward to have strong suppression, they had better economic recovery going forward when they didn't open up too early. The ones that opened up too early had much worse economic outcomes because they had to close down later. And that proved much, consumer confidence took a much greater hit. People were less willing to spend money because they didn't trust their governments anymore to protect their health. So that's something that is an established finding about the 1917-18 flu that's comparable to today. And we can talk about, so I think that's probably the best to address that comment, and we can go on to other questions and come back to this if there aren't other questions. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. I know that specifically in reference to the 1916-17 influenza, the Spanish influenza pandemic that is being used as a comparison, there is sometimes a tale of two cities that I've seen in some charts where there's a comparison. I believe it's between St. Louis and Philadelphia, and talking about either an attempt at herd immunity or an attempt at suppression, and some people comparing some of the pros and cons between these different approaches. And I think a lot of days people are talking about the Swedish model today as an attempt at herd immunity.
Yeah,
Maybe while we're gathering some additional questions, maybe you can make a comment about
sure.
that as well.
Yeah, Swedish model is they're actually doing really well at going toward herd immunity. What they're doing is they have a much more developed and better healthcare system than the US. So they are able to let people to not have a suppression that's nearly as rough. And South Korea also has that. South Korea didn't have nearly as much of a suppression. They were able to have their economy going. They had only 250 deaths. So that's actually a better comparison model than the Swedish one. I think they have something like 3,000 deaths by now. In Sweden, which is a much smaller country than South Korea. South Korea has 60 million people with 250 deaths. That's a wonderful model if we could get there. Sweden had something like that where they're trying to copy some elements of South Korea, and because they had a hospital system that's much better developed than the US hospital system, they are able to take more patients. So the death rate, which was in northern Italy, went to 11%, 12%. In New York City, of course, it went much higher than the 0.5 to 1%. We don't yet have final numbers for New York City, but the death rate for what happens when you don't have a very well developed hospital system, when it's just kind of running on bare bones, where a little bit more of a surge of patients would overwhelm it, as we have very much in the US, unfortunately, going on, then all the patients who, if you're going toward herd immunity, all the patients who would otherwise go to the hospital would die. So that's the problem with herd immunity. That's what people don't realize about the Swedish system. If we didn't have that problem, then yeah, I think herd immunity would probably be the best trade-off in terms of allowing people to still work and have some social distancing, some suppression, but still have a lot of work, still have a lot of activities without overwhelming the hospital systems. That would probably be a worthwhile trade-off. But it's not up to me even. Realistically speaking, I'm not the decision maker, right? The politicians, they can't stand the headlines of trucks full of refrigerated trucks full of bodies because their healthcare systems are getting overwhelmed. That's just the political reality of the situation.
The situation indeed has been very difficult to see this kind of news coming on a daily basis. Let's take some additional questions. Perhaps it is a little off topic, but countries like Germany have contained this. Are any making better progress developing a vaccine?
I'm not sure Germany is making better progress in developing a vaccine. There's a number of countries. What the EU is doing is that they're combining forces to have a nationwide, I think there's something like an $8 billion fund to fund vaccine development. And it would be nice if the US joins it, but it doesn't look like it's doing that, unfortunately, trying to go it alone. Germany, in particular about Germany has been pretty successful at containing the pandemic. And I mentioned Germany as a case study that's quite comparable to the US in terms of size, economic might, and diversity, complexity. It's been doing a much better job because it's been much more effective in contact tracing and testing. So a lot of testing, and then finding the people who are actually sick, getting them into isolation, tracing their contacts, getting those contacts who contacted them into isolation. As a result of that, much more of Germany has been able to be open and not closed down. So the economic cost is much lower in Germany because of much better testing and contact tracing. If the US had invested, we can still choose to invest into testing and contact tracing, we can get there. And this has to be a federal response. And the federal government has so far not been willing to really focus on investing money into testing and contact tracing. So we're not following the German model. We're not following the South Korean model, which has been much more tracking using apps and so on. And anyway, so we're not really doing very well at all.
It's interesting that oftentimes as auditors, risk managers, internal control professionals, we think so of different activities being grouped into preventive, detective, and corrective sort of buckets. And so if social distancing is a preventive measure and testing is detective and perhaps isolation would be corrective, it creates an interesting paradigm for our profession to think about some of the measures that are
Yes,
being done.
yes.
In South Florida, there's a couple of industries that are very important, and we're getting a question that relates specifically to one of these industries. So, banking, international banking,
Hmm.
and regional banking even is extremely important to South Florida. Uh, and we are interested in getting your thoughts on specific industries. What do
Hmm.
you see as the three largest COVID-19 impacts to the banking industry using the moderate view? All right, so the three largest impacts to banking
Hmm.
using the moderate view.
Great. Just in terms of internal auditors, I want to congratulate all internal auditors on May being the Internal Auditing Awareness Month. So happy Internal Auditing Awareness Month for all the folks who are in internal auditing. Now going to banking for the moderate view. The realist, so that's kind of the most likely situation to happen. There are a number of impacts that you want to be thinking about in that kind of scenario. One is government stimulus, which is coming through banks, and banks are taking their fair share. So there's going to be some money coming in that way. So that's kind of one thing that you want to be thinking about. Another thing that you want to be thinking about is what's going to happen to defaults. This is going to be a huge blow to banks. They are greatly underestimating the kind of defaults that will happen. So this will be a major issue. This will be a major problem. Banks will have to deal with many more defaults than they currently think they are. They don't have nearly a big enough economic cushion planning for the reality of what will happen. So this is a big problem. Now, banks that are involved in investments, they are, so a number of banks, of course, are involved in investment, stock management, and so on. Another impact is that the market is currently way overpriced because it has not factored in. I mean, it's pretty much back at pre-pandemic levels, and this is ridiculous. This is absurd in terms of the reality of the situation. It's clear that we're already in a major recession. Even if we had a vaccine right now, immediately, wonderfully now, we would still be in a major recession. The market can't fairly, accurately, appropriately evaluate the current situation as just as good as it was in January 2020. That's ridiculous. But we don't have the vaccine now, and we won't have it until early 2022 at the earliest, but realistically speaking, closer to 23, 24. So in that moderate scenario, there will be many more defaults than people are thinking, as I mentioned, and the stock market will go way down. A lot of people will pull their money out of stocks. They'll put their money into bonds, whatever. So banks will have less money to manage. They'll have less fees on that. So I'd say those three are the biggest impacts on banking.
Interesting. Dr. Gleb, I know it's 7. I wonder if you might humor us and answer
Yeah,
just
I'll be happy
one
to.
one final. Thank you. I think this is extremely helpful, and we're very appreciative of it. There's someone who's asking a question that relates very specifically to South Florida, and
Mm-hmm.
that is in South Florida, we oftentimes go through a number of planning and preparation steps for hurricane events.
Mm-hmm.
And does the nature of planning change for a fast moving event like a hurricane when a slow moving event like a pandemic is already occurring, or should they be treated as separate events? So
Of course,
clearly,
yeah, of course they should be treated as related. So when you're dealing with a pandemic, your capacity is much less, much lower. We have quarantine, shelter in place, especially if it's during a period of restriction. So right now, Florida is one of the states that's opening up, even though cases are a little bit going down. The cases will go up and restrictions will eventually need to be imposed. So if you're dealing with hurricane season, I'm guessing restrictions will be imposed in Florida maybe, oh, depending on how lucky we get with how less transmission of the virus there is in the summer. So far, it seems only a little bit less. Maybe we'll get lucky, I don't know. But let's say that they get imposed by September. You're still in hurricane season then. So you'll still have restrictions while dealing with hurricanes, and that will make for a much more complex problem. So you need to very much be thinking about how are you going to deal with hurricanes, flooding, various other issues, various natural disasters, not only hurricanes, of course, hurricanes, biggest issue in Florida, South Florida specifically, in the context of restrictions, quarantines, various supply chain disruptions which will happen. I mean, we're already seeing meat chain disruptions. FEMA, the federal government, is much less able to help because it's engaged in various COVID-19 activities. So you need to be able to, for your business, for your organization, whatever you're doing, and for your career, think about how you can prepare for effectively for a fast-moving event while you're also impacted and weakened and harmed by COVID-19 and the restrictions with COVID-19.
Excellent. Well, that was very helpful. I believe that we could potentially go on for quite some time talking about this, but we want to be respectful of your time, and we're very grateful. So I think that you shared already some information about how people can get in contact with you. Yes, there's a tiny URL there.
Yes, tiny URL /d-event. So yes, don't have time for more questions right now, but I'm happy to have a free coaching session with whoever wants one to help them adapt this information, answer questions, adapt information to their specific context.
Excellent. And just so everybody knows, we'll also make this information available on the website and share it so that you have additional access to how to contact Dr. Gleb. Well, Dr. Gleb, thank you very much for that extremely informative presentation. I think you've given us all a lot to think about, and you'll probably be hearing from some of us very soon.
Excellent. I'm very glad to help, and have a great rest of the meeting.
All right. Thanks. Have a good evening. Okay, so now I'm going to transition and share my screen. And I suppose if we're really going to have this much remote activity from now on, then I probably need to get a lot better at using the toolkit of Zoom and hosting these kinds of meetings and coordinating and sharing this kind of information. So something that I commit to doing with you is practicing on some of this technology and information so that I'm a little bit better at being able to conduct these kinds of meetings. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about conducting specifically this type of meeting going forward for some foreseeable time, and making these types of resources available as well. So on to our general meeting agenda for the rest of the evening. We're going to talk about some of the activity that the chapter has performed over the past year. We're going to give you an update with where the chapter is. We're going to very importantly talk about some of, as I was just mentioning, our COVID-19 support. There are things that ISACA International is doing for you. There are things that ISACA South Florida is doing for you. And we're going to talk about some of the activities that have been performed already. We're going to recognize some excellent accomplishments on some people, and we're going to award the scholarships that we have every year. And we're going to talk a little bit about the outlook for the chapter and activities going forward. So in order for this not to just be a one-sided presentation, we're going to have a little bit of interactivity in the next half of the meeting so that you have some additional opportunity to share some of your feedback. And of course, you can also still continue writing in questions and comments in the chats. Questions will be addressed. It's easier to address questions at the end. So if you put your questions there, we can address them at the end. And I believe that some other people perhaps will also be able to join me in answering some of those questions. And in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you'll notice that there's going to be some engagement triggers. That's so that I will remember to reach out to you and seek your feedback on just a couple of things as we go through the evening. So I would like to, first of all, since this is our annual general meeting and our reset and our reinduction of the new board coming in, want to make sure that we're always framing our conversation in the mission statement that ISACA South Florida has established for performing our activities, so that you have a clear view of the purpose of our activity that we're performing, and that is to help South Florida realize the positive potential of technology. That's the mission statement that we crafted last year. It was an update to a previous mission statement that we had, and we'll be talking a little bit about those types of activities and our strategic objectives that we performed last year and that we will also perform again this year. But before we do that, in order to warm us up just a little bit, and also to make sure that I know how to do this correctly, we're going to go ahead and practice on a very simple poll so that we can get some interaction and so that we can make sure that I am presenting this information and so that you can all see how the polling experience works in this format. So right now, as a practice question, I'm going to launch out there a question that should be popping up on your screen right now, and that is, are you a member of ISACA South Florida? Of course, the reason that we're asking this, not only to practice, but is also because this meeting specifically, as well as a number of meetings that we're going to be performing in the near future and on an ongoing basis, are welcoming not only to members, but also to those who are prospective members and interested, also those who are in affiliate organizations. There are a number of them. For example, the IIA, the ISSA, and Tech Lauderdale, and Palm Beach Tech, and a lot of other organizations that we interact with. SIM, we're going to be doing something with TDWI that we'll be talking about in a little bit. So we are involving a lot of members of our community, and not everyone here is a member of ISACA South Florida, and you are welcome just as much. We're thrilled to have you. And what I'll do now is share the results of this poll. This also creates a baseline of expectation for me so that I can know, as I do some additional polls throughout the evening, approximately how many people I expect to respond. Some people, of course, are joining by phone. Some people have other things that are happening in the background, and so not everyone will be able to respond to the poll, but it looks like we have a benchmark of 50, more or less, responses that we can expect, and about 86% or 43% of the 43 of the respondents are indeed members of ISACA South Florida, and then another 7 or 14% are not members of ISACA South Florida. And I should have just shared those results, so now you can see that ratio of those who are members versus those who are not members. And we'll be doing several other polls throughout the evening. So let's move on. As you saw on the previous slide, ISACA South Florida's mission is to help South Florida realize the positive potential of technology, and ISACA International's mission is to help you realize the positive potential of technology. So ours, of course, has a regional focus. ISACA International is an organization with more than 200,000 members and affiliates and more than 200 chapters around the globe. So it is a very large organization that we are a local chapter of, and we have worked hard to align our purpose here in South Florida with the international purpose that aims to achieve the vision or the promise of inspiring confidence that enables innovation through technology. And I can see that this is going to be an especially important purpose for people if we're going to be adapting even more than we already are to virtual communication and virtual interaction, and becoming increasingly reliant upon it, not just in a temporary basis, but almost on a go-forward basis, given that some people will be planning for the moderate scenario or perhaps even the pessimistic scenario of the types of things, risks and events that Dr. Gleb laid out for us this evening. So the chapter on an annual basis gets together and sets strategic objectives for what we want to accomplish in that year, and we also try and align ourselves with strategic objectives of what we're going to accomplish in a longer outlook than a year. Say something like 3 years to 5 years is potentially what we've been conversationally talking about in previous strategic planning meetings. And we're about to have our new strategic planning meeting with the incoming board in just a few days. So in our 2018 to 19 year, we aimed to have higher levels of engagement. We aimed to perform more targeted activities. That's the type of events that we host, and you'll see those types of events that will be discussed and relayed, and we'll go over the types of events that we've we've conducted over the past year. We've attempted to have higher community alignment, which is why you've seen us do a lot of joint events with other organizations in the community. And we are also attempting to, of course, continually increasing the technical skills and competencies of our members and affiliates and guests, while also aligning with ISACA International. That alignment with ISACA International is one of the reasons that you saw that ISACA International purpose now being phrased by our ISACA South Florida purpose or mission statement here as we apply to the region. And something that we've done in order to try and accomplish this in the past year is we focus specifically on academic relations, corporate relations, and communications. And you're going to see some of the results of those activities that we've performed as we go through the chapter events, as we go through some of our successes, as we talk about some of the corporate partners and sponsorships that we've aligned up, and as we talk about some of the communication activities that we've been performing. We're very grateful to Trixie de Leon Gonzalez, who took up the charge of academic relations in the past year. And we're very grateful to Ashish Dam, as of course, as well as their committees who supported them in accomplishing improvements in corporate relations by reaching out to corporate sponsors. We'll provide that information here in just a little bit on how to contact ASH. But by reaching out to them and creating those partnerships, we've been able to have more types of events like this, have good sponsors represented there, and provide additional thought leadership. And then communications has been everything from sending out the constant newsletter to try and creating a better social media interaction, even to attempting a couple of experiments in this type of area, so that we have a constant flow of communication between what is happening with our chapter and with our community. But something that we very specifically want to make sure that we highlight right now, as is extremely relevant and probably on a lot of people's minds, is the support that we're providing directly relevant to the pandemic, to COVID-19, to the hardship that people are experiencing as a result of that. There are things being done on two different levels, and we're going to cover those two different levels. That is, ISACA International, the parent organization, is taking steps. ISACA South Florida, your chapter, is also taking steps. ISACA International has laid out a couple of phases for some of the support that they're giving for people right now. And that is, if you have not already renewed your membership until May 31st, you can go ahead and still renew your membership for 2020, and there will be no late penalty and no reinstatement fee. Additionally, you will retain your existing join date and membership level. This is very important, especially for people who, for whatever reason, have experienced some type of hardship, and so they were holding back on renewing those types of fees, to make sure that we communicate this type of information. After May 31st, then they enter in the second phase of the support that they're providing, and that is, at that point, ISACA International normally runs the ability to renew or to join with half dues. And as a one-time exception this year, you can also have the half dues as well as have no reinstatement fee. You can still retain your existing join date and membership level. And in order to do this, you must contact ISACA International through this support portal, and that is support.isaca.org. You have to reach out to them directly in order to do that. So they're doing a couple of different things that you can see here as far as renewing your membership. If you haven't had the chance to do that, they're providing you a discount, and they're giving you different ways to reach out to them. Please, whatever you do, whether you take this opportunity or whether you don't know if you're ready to take this opportunity yet, what's most important is that you reach out to us and let us know that there's things that that we can do to help you, right? Let us know that you need help, and we will find a way to help you. We will either facilitate that communication directly with ISACA International, and or we'll look for ways to support you on a chapter and community level. We want to make this very clear, but you have to let us know. You have to reach out. So I put my email at the beginning of the presentation. There will be other emails to reach out to throughout the rest of this presentation. You can also go to our website, which is here on this slide, isacasfl.org. Reach out to us and let us know if you have any challenges, and we will find a way to help you. ISACA International has also provided the option of chapters to reduce their dues by half, their chapter dues by half, through that June 1st to July 31st period. We are opting into that option, as you will see over on the right-hand side when we talk about our activities here at the local level. And then as of August 1st, normally what they do is they let you renew your membership. And at that point, since the year is almost over, you're renewing it not just for the ending of that year, but then for the entire full year the next year. So you're renewing it basically for a year and a couple of months, or you're creating it for a year and a couple of months. They're extending that opportunity of no late penalty, no reinstatement fee, although you do have to reach out to them and let them know. All right, so that's what's being done at the international level. At the local level, we are, of course, as I just mentioned, opting in to that half dues during the period of June 1st to July 31st. This is at the professional level. Please keep in mind that student membership does not have chapter dues. It only has ISACA international dues, but there are $0 chapter dues for student members. And then at the very least through August 2020, as you'll see in our upcoming list of events that we're going to talk about, we'll be hosting virtual events, of course, clearly, with options for free or drastically discounted registration. And as an example, I'm listing here the registration fees that we're charging for the current, right now, ongoing CISM and CISA reviews that we're holding live as virtual events. And you can find that information on our website. And those events you'll see around the country are hosted for registration fees that tend to start somewhere around $600 to $700, and they get into the four-figure amounts for the registrations. Our chapter is taking a very strong step in this area to present what we believe is a lot of support to people who are looking to engage and certify and improve their career prospects. And we're charging fees as low as $75 for members and students and $95 for non-members. So we're taking what we believe is a very strong step in that area to provide this. We're not looking to make money on these activities. We're looking to support you. But again, if you will reach out to us and let us know specifically where you need support, then we will find ways to make that happen. And then individual support can be obtained by either emailing me directly or reaching out to us through the contact form on the website. And I have a reminder here that I wanted to engage you in another poll, and that is, we kind of want to understand a little bit, at least a very shallow level, how much people are being impacted in our local community by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I'm currently launching a poll right now, and it is going to be asking you two questions. And the two questions basically are you going to some physical workspace right now that's with other people? Like, have you started doing that? Is that something that you're doing presently? I imagine a lot of people right now are remote. And so some people may be saying, yes, I have some, for example, I have some clients that actually tell me that they're still going to their office. And then some people presumably will also be answering no, because a lot of people are working remote right now. And then, of course, there's a third response for people who were already remote even before the pandemic. So we're going to gather and share that information with one another right now, so that not only are we, the chapter, getting a better understanding of what's going on with you, but also so that you are understanding what's going on with each other. And then the second question is us getting a better understanding of how much the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted you personally. I did leave this question just a tiny bit ambiguous because I want you to interpret what impact means to you. Impact is of course a very personal thing. So some people will feel that high impact means one thing versus moderate versus low versus not at all. This is something that is your perspective, and we want for you to answer with your perspective. So those two questions are presented out there right now. People are responding as we speak, and I'll give that just another couple of seconds for people to additionally respond to this question, and then we'll go ahead and share the results, because our chapter is going to take this information into our strategic planning session to understand just how acute and the types of activities, in addition with some of the questions that we'll ask later, the types of activities that that will be meaningful and helpful for you. All right, so now at this point we have 45 respondents. That's fairly close to the benchmark that we established earlier. So I'm going to share the results with you, which means that you should be able to see that right now 76% of people are not reporting regularly to a shared physical workspace. 7% of people are actually reporting right now to a shared physical workspace, and then 18% of people were remote even before restrictions started. Obviously, in our profession, this is something that may be a little more common than in other professions. And then, how much has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted you? We can see that there's actually a pretty flat distribution here between high impact, moderate impact, and low impact, even though the highest peak there is on moderate impact. So most people, the highest percentage of responses, 36% of people feel that they're having a moderate impact upon them from the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's information that we'll certainly take into our planning as we continue to talk about the year going forward. And so who are we planning for? Of course, primarily our members so that we can serve them directly, and then also the community at large. And let's talk just a little bit about membership, where it stands for this current year. So we're going to benchmark it against last year. As of last year, May 2019, we had 963 members, and that consisted of a number of different people who held certifications, 500 in the CISA, 138 CRIS certifications, CISM, obviously very popular, 200 there, 35 C guides, and then the CSX, that is that technical, hands-on, tools-based certification that is taken in a lab and then performed using tools in a limited amount of time. So it's a simulated certification and a simulated experience. There were 10 people who had the fundamentals, which is just the conceptual preparation for that certification as of last year. And then we compare that to where we are this year. So a couple of things. First of all, you'll notice that for the past 2 years, we have achieved the 1,000 member benchmark before what ISACA calls the purge. And that is every year in April, early April, we go ahead and those who have not renewed their membership, they're removed from active roles. So every year we end up throughout the year, kind of for the past 2 years, getting over 1,000 members. And then just enough people don't renew that actually puts us just a tiny bit below that 1,000 member threshold. And that's happened for the past 2 years. And as of last year, at this time, we were at 963. Something that's different at this year is that you can see that not only did we surpass that 1,000 member benchmark, but we continued to maintain 1,000 members even after the renewal cycle and the renewal process. So we actually got up close to 1,100 members, and then there's some people that didn't renew. And the constituency of the certifications that make up this 1,000 members is very similar to in the prior year. And so something that will help us, because right now, as I mentioned before, we were conducting virtual CISA review sessions and CISM review sessions. Something that will help us is understanding who is going to be seeking certification within the next year. So right now, I'm launching a poll that asks, are you planning to obtain any of the following ISACA certifications within the next year? Now, I realize that a number of people who are in this conversation and who are a part of this webinar are already certified. I'm very aware of that. So it could be that so many people are already certified that there's not necessarily going to be a very large percentage of people who are going to be seeking certification in the upcoming year. But what we do want to understand and have a good measure of is, first of all, approximately how many people, at least out of this sample, which we can project over the going to be seeking certification, and then also which types of certification are they seeking, so that we make sure we're presenting the correct product offering to you as we're hosting these kinds of events and CISA and CISM review, etc., those sorts of training events. And then it'll also help us for the types of content that we put in our conferences as well. So as of this point, I have 44 respondents. I'll allow just another second in case anybody is getting a chance to respond as to whether or not they're going to be seeking any certification. And now I'll go ahead and close the poll and share those results with you. And that is 73% of the people are not planning on pursuing a certification this year. We know that that's going to be a big population because of the high amount of certification that's already in this. But then 11% of the people on this call are going to be pursuing a CISA, 13% are going to be pursuing a CISM, and we know the popularity of those two certifications has driven us to create those types of review events. So we have the CISA and CISM review already scheduled, and then 9% are actually going to be pursuing a C-RISC, that is the primarily risk management and risk assessment focused certification from ISACA, and then 4% pursuing the C-Guide, and some additional interest, also 4% going to be pursuing the CSX certification. So that's some very good information, especially around the C-RISC, that will help us plan going forward. And so at this point, I'm going to take just a second to double check and make sure that anybody who needs to, let's see, not getting the polling questions. Okay, so some people are not getting the polling questions, so I'll try and we'll definitely take a look at that and see if there's anything we can do about that. I'm very sorry for that, and we'll try and make sure that we get that addressed before the next event, so that we can better understand. And also, if there's things that that we can do, for example, tell you to update your Zoom client or tell you to join using a certain browser, then we'll make sure to try and pass along that information to you as well. So thank you very much for providing that type of feedback. All right, so we have, to this end, conducted a large amount of activity over the past fiscal year. So please remember that our ISACA South Florida fiscal year runs from June 1st to May 31st, which means that the type of activity that I'm going to be presenting to you right now started in June 1st, 2019. And then we're talking about the things that we planned and held and coordinated up through May 31st. So there's even an event that's on there that's just before the end of the month, but has not yet happened. All right, so what have we done this past year to try to provide you value? Several things, actually a lot. We've held our GRC conference that was done at FAU's Tech Runway, and that made 8 CPEs available. And something that you'll notice that we're tallying on this screen is the number of CPEs that we're making available to the membership in-person events. Well, previously in in-person events, now in in-person and virtual events, primarily virtual events that we'll be hosting. So basically, helping you maintain your certifications is one of our top priorities, something we want to make sure we're always doing. So we're tabulating the amount of CPEs that we're making available to you. And remember, you do need to have, I believe, a minimum of 20 years of 20 CPEs per year over the 3-year period, but then it actually needs to be higher than that in the overall 3-year cumulative period. We had a summer social. We did that at the Funky Buddha Brewery in Fort Lauderdale. We had our September Dine and Learn, which was a fantastic event that we did And I have here that we did it in Boca Raton. I don't think that's correct. I think we did this at Nova Southeast University. There was 1.5 CPEs made available for that evening. We also hosted a community day. I don't know if we did an effective job enough at publicizing this, but we tried to let you know that we, in addition to serving the community through thought leadership and through this type of professional development, part of showing people the positive potential of technology is also showing the impact that we as professionals have on our communities. In true South Florida style, we chose to have a beach cleanup on October 5th, 2019, and we had a number of people out there to participate in that. Then in October, we had a CISA certification review. This was a 2-day review that we held down at Kaufman Rawson's office in Miami. And there were 16 CPEs made available there. Please note that these reviews oftentimes are very large blocks of CPEs, and so it's a very good way of making sure that you're satisfying the requirements. Then we had the November Dine and Learn event with the Cloud Security Alliance. That was at the Signature Grand. And we had, of course, our holiday party at the Renaissance Implantation. And then we had the 13th annual WOW conference at FIU's Coben Center. And if you look there at the date, we had that on February 21st, and I'm sure glad that we did. It seems that time was on our side for holding this type of event, because after that is when people started going into different types of restrictions, and the state of Florida, a couple of weeks after that, ended up going into restrictions. So it's a good thing we had that there. We have just recently, as I was talking about, at this discounted rate, we have scheduled a SISM review that we held, and that was a virtual review. And I've actually got here that we only put 2 CPEs there. That's not correct. That was 16 CPEs, so the number is higher. And then we have the annual general meeting that we're holding tonight, another 2 CPEs there. And then there was the SISM review that is forthcoming, and the CISA review that will be at the end of May. So those are the types of events, and you can actually get the details specifically for these on our website, and that is isacasfl.org. And please note that we're continuing to try and make sure that these CPEs are available for you to maintain your certifications. And then, in addition, we're trying to be good stewards of the resources that are provided to us through your membership dues and through the hosting of these types of events. So we're being fiscally responsible. There's kind of some information here that provides a very high-level overview of what that looked like. The easiest way to do this is to provide you a apples-to-apples comparison, comparing the current year to date versus the prior year to date. Although you'll notice that our fiscal year ends in the end of May, so we have last year's fiscal year end numbers at the bottom, and this year's fiscal year end numbers are not yet available because we're still finishing up the month. But basically, the high level is that there were revenues, our budget approaches somewhere in the neighborhood of approximately $120,000, and we're spending typically less than what's being brought in, which is causing a positive change in net assets, so that we can maintain stability and also make sure that we have ISACA available to you for the future. Just like Dr. Gleb was talking about, a bit of a cash buffer there. This year, our expenditure was actually down through March and April, because a couple of events that we would have hosted, and that is a March Dine and Learn event, as well as we would have had this in person at a nice place with dinner and that sort of thing, and that money did not end up getting spent, which is why there's a larger change in net assets, or money left over after our fiscal year this year. And then something that is very important for us that we've been doing every single year and that we announce at this event is our ISACA South Florida scholarships, so that you have an idea of one of the great uses of those resources that we're entrusted with. This year, there are 5 winners of the scholarships. I mentioned earlier in the evening that Trixie de Leon Gonzalez has done a great job of reaching out to a number of different universities to make additional contacts and liaisons with professors, academic liaisons, administrators in those organizations. If you're affiliated with some of these and or other organizations in our community, please don't hesitate to reach out to her. Her contact information will be presented in just a moment. But for the meanwhile, I'm going to announce the 5 people from 4 different universities who won these scholarships. And something that's a obvious fruit of Trixie's efforts is that these winners came from 4 different universities, which shows the level of outreach that's being performed. So great congratulations go to Jody Salzman from FAU, go Owls, congratulations, Jody. To Ki Wang from FIU, congratulations, Ki. To Sahana Nanaya from Nova Southeastern University, congratulations to you, Sahana. To Luca McLeod from Barry University, congratulations, Luca. And to Chris Jackson from Nova Southeastern University, congratulations, Chris. We're very proud of you. Each of these winners is awarded for their efforts $1,000 scholarship, and this is something that we continue to do year after year to make sure that we're providing support to those people who are going to be coming into our profession. And if you would like more information about how to obtain these scholarships and apply for these scholarships, that information is on our website, and you can also reach out to Trixie. So now what I'm going to do is talk about and thank the outgoing board for all of their effort and their sacrifice and their hard work that they've made throughout this entire year to make these types of things, these events that I listed, as well as these other activities that we've been coordinating to make all this possible. And then in just a few moments, what I'll also do is introduce the new and incoming board. And as I do that, I'm going to also invite those people who will be able to share a few words. A couple of people reached out specifically and confirmed that they'll be able to share a few words when that time comes. So we'll look forward to hearing not only from me, but also from all the people who make all this great activity happen. Before I do that, I want to make sure that I'm not remiss in thanking all the people who were with us up to this past May, this past year, and who made all this possible. So at the top, you have the 4 officers, myself, Tina Honey, Joanne Clipper, and Peter Christians. And then you have Trixie, whose name you've heard a few times, Maria Aris, Isaiah, Ash, the Director of Corporate Relations, Sandy Trujillo, who was the Director of IT Governance, Alexis, who in addition to being our immediate past president, also gave enough to be our Director of Membership as well. Thank you very much. Sandra Paras, who came in and joined as Director of Programming mid-year and hit the ground running and really made some incredible things happening. Thank you very much, Sandra. Chibwese Alutu, the Director of Volunteers, we're very grateful. Clay Mogenberg, who not only provided a great deal of institutional knowledge, but also was instrumental in helping out on the corporate relations effort. Lynn Cotton, who actually led that event that I was talking about in October, the Community Day. So she was in charge of that beach cleanup. And then, of course, Torian Imam was the Director at Large from Protivity, and they got a great turnout to the ISACA WOW event that we're thankful that we got to make happen. And so now, as I move into the new and incoming board, and I will invite them to make a few comments, and I'll do that in order. I wanted to make sure that before I moved into that, I just thanked very briefly Eric Pfeiffer and Michael Bayer, both of whom are previous members of ISACA South Florida's board, and they continue to give back. And the way they did so this year was by serving on the nominations committee, so that they actually reached out and contacted candidates, communicated with candidates, received the nomination forms, helped to create and distribute that survey that goes out to actually create our voting. So thank you very much, Eric and Michael, for making that possible and for welcoming in our new board. And so now I'm going to go ahead and actually bring in a couple of people to make some additional comments. And the people who reached out to me and said that they would be thrilled to make some comments have an asterisk by their name. And I'll go in order. And so one of the first people that I am thrilled to welcome to share some thoughts with you is our very own Tina Honey. Tina, do I have you shared?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having the confidence to vote me back in for another term. I'm excited to get working again. This is going to be a very interesting year with the pandemic that we're dealing with, but I'm super excited for this challenge, and I hope to continue to be able to serve the members that I've served over the last 2 years. Thank you so much for your opportunity.
Thank you, Tina. And now, so that I keep track, I'm going to go in order to Pete Christians.
Rob, thanks, and thanks everyone as well for participating in the election. And I feel privileged to be on the board. I think I know a lot of folks that are members of the chapter, and for those of you who know me, I've been very active with the association for many years. In fact, it's great to see all the details that Rob provided, and I think we've had a phenomenal couple of years. I remember this chapter when it was less than 300 people, and we're closer, I think, now to about 1,100 members, which is amazing. And I think we've done a pretty good job as well of organizing a lot of activities, and we're being very mindful, as Rob said, of the what's happening with COVID and our membership, that you know, we have to give back and do as much as we can to have events, have instructional events for those of us that are looking for CPEs. And I also would put a note out there for anyone who's interested to be a volunteer and get active in this association and be a part of something bigger and give back. Please do reach out to us. I know we're in a bit of a board transition, so Rob, I'm gonna put your name out there for folks to reach out to for now. Nick Spinks is our new volunteer director, but we're definitely looking forward to having folks participate, and ISACA is a wonderful organization. Actually, one thing we didn't mention, there is a new certification that's coming out as well. So in addition to the ones that Rob put out there with the membership number, there's a new privacy certificate coming out. For those of you who are interested in that, take a look at the ISACA.org website. There's a lot of detail out there. So thanks for the opportunity to serve. And Rob, back to you.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to welcome in Joanne Clipper, our incoming treasurer.
Hi, everyone. Well, it's so excited that you have the confidence to vote me back in again. How can I say anything more than what Robin, Tina, and Pete have already said? I'll give you a little bit of background on me. I've had over 40 years of healthcare experience, from being a child and adult therapist to now working in IT security and audit. The last 10 years or so, I've been part of our local ISACA South Florida board, and I love serving our community. Just like everyone has said prior to me, we're here for you. If you need something, if you have financial hardships with your renewals, please reach out to us. I'll give you a real easy address to remember: president@isacasfl.org. Please reach out to us. We're here to help you. Thanks again.
Thank you, Joanne. And now our incoming director of certifications, Maria Eris.
First of all, cheers for everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much for voting me again. This is going to be my third year serving this amazing association. So I'm thrilled to continue, and you know, feel part of our community is essential for me. So I'm so happy to be back. And also I want to, you know, already talk about you know, these virtual sessions that we have for the system and CISA review. So we have our first one a couple of weekends ago, and we're thrilled of the success of that. So we open another two in case you have you need CPEs or you are preparing for those certifications. The next one will be the CISA on May 23rd, that weekend. And then I think the slide was like has a mistake on the date for the system. We have another one for the system on the first week of a weekend of June. So if you have any questions, please reach out to President at ISACA, or in my case, a certification or certifications as ISACA at isacasfl.org. So back to you, Robert, and cheers again.
Thank you, Maria, and also thank you for pointing out that date is not right, so that we can make sure that we give people the right information for the CISA and CISM reviews that are both upcoming. At the end of this month, there will be a CISA review, and then in June, there will be a CISM review. So both of those are still forthcoming, and the correct information is definitely on our website, and we'll make sure to keep you informed with additional communications. And then we also have Clay Morgenborg joining back as Director at Large this year.
Hi, everyone. Many of you probably have met me before at our conferences. I've been involved with the chapter since 2003. And it's a really exciting place to be, especially at times like these where, as colleagues, we have to support each other. This is going to be a time of amazing disruption and transition, not only in our workplace, but at home. As you can see, everybody's really working remotely and having to adjust, which really, it creates and is going to create incredible challenges for us as professionals and as covered by Dr. Gleb. And that's one of the things as a board that we're really taking into consideration in creating our programming for the upcoming year. Can you imagine that we've had face-to-face conferences for decades now, and we're having to shift all of that to virtual in order to support our members. As a board, we've been receiving correspondence from members and non-members asking for more training and CPE opportunities. Unfortunately, the impact on our community is significant in terms of employment opportunities. There are a number of my colleagues that I know have lost their employment, and it's really unfortunate. So we're going to do everything we can to create learning opportunities. You may have noticed in the interim that we, in addition to the CISA and the CISM review course, we did post on our homepage a entirely free curriculum provided by Fortinet. It includes all networking from entry level, FortiGate management through advanced networking, and it's all for free. These are the kind of things that we want to provide to you that kind of fills in the gap until we get our curriculum together and deliver more content to you. And the good, exciting thing about the new content is that it'll be not only recorded, and it'll be replayed. So you may not be able to attend the session when we provide it, but you might be able to watch a replayed session. But please do reach out to us at President at ISACA. But reach out to any of us, really. We really do want to hear your input. If there's content that you are looking for, perhaps we can locate it or incorporate it into our curriculum. So any questions you have, please contact us. We're here for you. We're kind of a selfless group, which is why we're involved, and we're eager to be parts of these boards, and we really want to make sure we give back to you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Clay, and absolutely give out that president email anytime you like. We'll make sure we get you to the right person, and we'll get you a response 100%. So I also wanted to introduce another incoming director at large, Lynn Cotton.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lynn, and I'm also in IT healthcare, and I'm excited to be elected a second year, and I look forward to working with the board to get things done. So if you want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me at director2@sfl.org. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to serve again.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Lynn. And then also, there's someone who is new to our board, and we're thrilled to have him. Mike Ortiz is an incoming director at large, and I wanted to try to make sure that we got Mike in. I know I had to do some last minute invitation. Mike, are you there?
Hey guys, I am here. My video is not working for some reason, of course, but either way, I'll take the chance. And again, thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to be part of this organization. I've been following it for some time now, so I know I'm in good company. A little bit about myself, since pretty much no one knows me except for maybe Tina and Isaiah, who I don't think is on the line. I'm from New York City, born and raised. I moved down to South Florida about 5 years ago. So I'm still trying to figure out Florida in general. But I'm working to build my network however I can. So I look forward to working with you all. Currently, I'm a network admin at White Oak, focusing on information security for the most part. And just last thing, I just want to say I look forward to working with each one of you. Of course, helping out however I can. Whenever I can, giving back to the South Florida community. Feel free to reach out to me whenever. I'm always open to connect. And thanks, Rob. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak. I wish my camera would work. I'll keep trying.
That's all right. Technical difficulties are something that we IT professionals are pretty familiar with. So no worries whatsoever. Thank you very much, Mike, and we're thrilled to have you. In addition to the people who mentioned that they wanted to share a few words, I don't want to forget to also mention the additional people who are also part of the incoming board, who are critical to our success. Some of them are in places right now, traveling or dealing with situations where they couldn't necessarily hop on a camera. They're here, they're participating, they're engaged. Trixie de Leon Gonzalez is coming back into our board as Director of Academic Relations, and we're thrilled for that. Ivan Reyes is joining us as a Director of Communications. Ash Dam is rejoining us as Director of Corporate Relations, and we're very happy for that. Mehmet Uve is previously a member of a number of different ISACA chapters, also new to South Florida area, just like Mike, and we're thrilled to have him as the Director of Membership. Sandra Paris, we're very lucky to have her back as Director of Programming. Isaiah Martin, also very lucky to have him back as Director of Marketing. A lot of creative talent there. Nick Spinks, who has been a member of this board before, has joined and come back as Director of Volunteers, and we're thrilled about that because Protivity has a great way of rallying together volunteers. And then, of course, it wouldn't feel right if we didn't also have Alexis Pedro Weeks, our previous president, still serving with us as the immediate past president position, which is a part of our bylaws, and we're very lucky to have him continuing with us. So please join me in virtually welcoming our incoming board for this current year, and we look forward to finding ways to make ourselves connected across cyberspace. So talking about ways that we'll be connecting in the very near future, we can move quickly into our upcoming calendar, and that is that we'll be having the CISA review at the end of this month. Okay, it looks like I got the dates right on this one. So the CISA review at the end of this month is May 23rd and 24th. Remember, this is a deeply discounted pricing. The CISM review is June 6th and 7th, also another 16 CPEs available there. We're currently in the process of planning right now a virtual GRC conference. We believe that this is getting locked in, so we're confident enough to go ahead and tease it out there, but it's still being planned. And then we have placeholders for information about for webinars to be performed in July and August, because it is our strong intent to keep presenting content, opportunities, abilities to connect with people and to keep your CPEs, and also to just stay current on events that are happening and changes in our profession in July and August. And then we're going to, we're in the process right now, it's early stage, of planning a joint conference, as I mentioned, with TDWI. That acronym used to stand for the Data Warehouse Institute. It now stands for Transforming Data with Innovation, I believe. I'll have it right by September, I promise. And so something that I want to make sure that we also ask you is, because we want to be presenting the type of content that you want, is I wanted to just take an opportunity to throw up a poll here about content specifically. And ISACA covers a lot of content, so admittedly I had to, create some categories here, and believe me, we can be more flexible than these categories portray. But I've gone ahead and thrown up 8 different types of categories of topics for people to let us know about the types of content that you want to see. Importantly, something that's different about this poll from some of the previous polls we've had during this evening is, in a previous poll, you were only able to give a single response. You're either a member or not a member. You're only able to give a single response. You're either working remote or you're not remote. In this poll, you are able to give multiple responses. And I think that provides the opportunity for you to let us know what types of content you're interested in, so that we can make sure that we're addressing those types of topics. And we're going to take back this information into our strategic planning session. We're going to provide this information to our Director of Programming, Sandra Paras. We're going to socialize it with the rest of the board, and make sure that we're planning the types of events that you will be interested in hearing, providing you the types of content that you're looking for. If for some reason there's not a topic here, or I've just really missed some area that is obvious and critical, as you've heard several times throughout the evening, there's an email that you can reach out to and voice your opinion, and we will gladly receive it. That email is president@isacasfl.org. You can also go to our website, isacasfl.org, and submit the contact form there. That will also come to me as well, and I'll distribute it with the entire board as well, so that your voice can be heard. So now that we've had the opportunity to receive 43 responses, very close to our benchmark, I'll go ahead and end the polling and share those results. And since I know that at least one person is not able to see some of the polling, I'm actually going to take just a real quick second to sort of list out some of the things. And that is that IT audit fundamentals, we actually have 43% of people that are in this call that responded to the poll, interested in learning about IT audit fundamentals. Risk assessment and risk management, 50%. Disruptive technology topics such as artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, cloud, etc., 64%. Data breaches and cybersecurity, 52%. Hands-on training with software and tools. This is something that has been an issue of discussion actually for a couple of years now, about how we can incorporate more of this. It's very interesting to see that 43% of the respondents to this survey are interested in receiving hands-on training with software and tools. I believe that speaks to the fact that ISACA International is presenting, in addition to other certifications, that CSX certification, which deals directly with hands-on work with tools. Management skills and leadership, 32%. It's natural that would be a little less. There are quite a lot of leaders in this organization and on this call, and they already have a lot of experience in that area. Standards and frameworks, maybe not as attractive as some of the other topics, at 30%. Privacy, regulations, and compliance, 66%, the #1 response for this poll. And we'll go ahead and take that information and incorporate that into our planning. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And now we'll actually move into how you can become further engaged. I'll run through some quick contact information here about becoming further engaged with our chapter. You've heard about volunteers and volunteering and the importance of that for events just like this and making these things possible. You can reach out to the incoming Director of Volunteers, Nick Spinks, who will be taking over this role. And we thank very much Tsipursky for having handled it for the past year. Are you interested in presenting on a topic? Well, you can certainly reach out to president at isacasfl.org, but you can also reach out to our programming director as well, programming at isacasfl.org. You just saw some of the topics of interest. You just saw, for example, that privacy regulation and compliance is a very relevant topic. For example, if that's something that you are a subject matter expert in, we would love to hear from you and be able to present your thought leadership in that area. Please reach out to us. How about promotions? Are you interested in sharing our information and becoming more involved in the social media aspects of it? And we'll reach out to us at communications@isacasfl.org. You can also actually reach out to us at marketing@isacasfl.org. I will add that address as well. You can also make sure to use the hashtag ISACASFL. And of course, we have a Twitter handle, ISACASFL, and we have still a Twitter bot that is retweeting ISACA information on a 24/7 basis, and that's ISACAtron. And are you interested in affiliating with our chapter? Here is an area where we're seeing fantastic amounts of progress, and I'm actually going to try and move very fast. I apologize for running a little bit long, but this is very important. There's a couple of universities that have recently reached out to us. Nova Southeastern University and FIU are interested in starting student chapters there at those institutions. That's something we haven't heard from in a little while. We're thrilled about that. If you're interested in connecting and you're affiliated with some organizations such as these or others in our community, please feel free to reach out to academicrelations@isacasfl.org. Partnering with corporate relations, such as having us incorporate people from your organization, sponsoring an event, being part of it. We're even going to find ways to incorporate virtual sponsors with virtual booths. I was just hearing about some technology that makes this possible, so we'll look into that. You can certainly reach out to corporate relations at isacasfl.org, and we're extremely grateful for the progress that has been made in this area in the past 12 months, the fiscal year. These are the organizations that have partnered with ISACA South Florida. You can see that this is an extraordinary testament to the efforts made by Ashdam and Clay Mogenberg in this area and really pushing and advancing this topic forward. And we also are very grateful for our affiliate organizations who have helped hold some joint events and brought some of these people to the table as well. We're thrilled to have these partnerships. We're looking forward to continuing to being connected with them and others in the future. So with that, I will actually make sure that I address any questions that have been asked. And I apologize for running over. I was really trying to run on time, but I apologize for that. So let's open up the floor to any questions and make sure that we get a chance to answer these if we have not already. So question and answer. Okay, Susanna, I apologize that we didn't get your polling situation worked out, and we're going to work on that in the future to make sure that we try and do that. Actually, as a general statement, I commit to you that we're going to work very hard to get better at hosting these virtual events. This is our first virtual webinar. We had a virtual training session. It went extremely well. A virtual webinar, we've got some practice to do, but that's okay. We will get better at it. And then let's take a look at the chat to see if there's any additional comments that we can address there as well. Congratulations. Wishing incoming success. Thanks so much, Tsipursky. We're thrilled to have your participation. Oh, actually, Mehmet, a new member of the board, would like to share a brief word with us. Let's see if I can accomplish this on the fly. And Mehmet, I think we now have you escalated to panelist, which should give you the opportunity to control your camera and microphone. Mehmet, are you there?
Yes, hi. Well, I'm very excited to be here and see you guys. And I just wanted to show myself to you so that we run into each other sometime. Uh, I'm very thankful and to all the members. I'm so excited. I don't know what to say, but this is a very great opportunity for me to be here in South Florida chapter. I'm a member of ISACA since 2002. I established Ankara chapter as the founder president, and before that, I was also in the board of founders in Istanbul chapter. So I'm of Turkish origin, and I'm here for the last 3 months. And I'm so excited to see you here, and thank you very much for everything. And thank you, Rob, for giving me the floor. I'm giving back to you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Thank you,
Mehmet. We're thrilled to have you. And welcome to South Florida.
Thank you very much.
And then it looks like in the chat, some people had some questions about some specifics, and people were, other board members were responding. Thank you so much for being active and providing all that information. So it looks like we probably got some of those questions addressed. Is there a deadline to report CPEs for 2019? Yes, there is a deadline. It actually passed. Please get those reported as soon as you can. Every December, ISACA International requires you to go ahead and submit those CPEs. So if you have a certification, they're going to want to receive those. You can self-report. And of course, we send out the CPE certificates, just like for tonight. Tonight, you will receive in your email a CPE certificate for 2 CPEs that you can then immediately self-report to ISACA.org. And you can do that under your individual portal. And then, well, thank you very much. I think that addressed everybody's questions. Unless there are any additional comments from the rest of the board, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for participating in this event tonight. We're thrilled to have you. We're obviously going to have a lot more virtual opportunities to connect. And please reach out, stay in touch, connect with one another, connect with us. We're very thrilled to be staying in contact with you across the distance for the time being as we prepare for the different scenarios. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you all, and talk to you soon.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Clay.
Thanks,
Bye,
Rob.
everyone.